If you haven't seen Money in the Bank, you've certainly seen all the scuttlebutt coming out of it. But I bet you don't know the finish or who won the actual main event. Nobody's talking about that. No one's talking about Cody and the Yeet Man against Logan Paul and John Cena. No one's talking about that. What everyone is talking about is the return of a 53-year-old comedy prelim wrestler. It really is amazing. And again, nothing against Ron Killings. I am agnostic towards Ron Killings. As I said on the flagship, this man could wrestle 10 more years with WWE. Fine by me. This man could disappear tomorrow, retire into his pile of cash, never to be heard from again. Not only would I not care, I probably wouldn't notice. And there's a good chance I would never watch another Ron the Truth Killings match because I don't think he's ever had a good match worth going back and watching. So I truly don't care about this guy. In a totally, again, agnostic way. Nothing against him. And not even a fraction of any kind of reverence or, nostalgia towards his career. But they brought him back. Big surprise. Nobody saw it coming. Nobody caught wind of it. Nobody reported it. And apparently, as the story goes, we now know more details of how he was. Now, let's be clear. He was never officially let go. Remember, his contract was going to be, was going to be not renewed. So he was still technically under contract, but now he's been given a new one. And apparently they had originally offered him an extension at some kind of reduced rate, different terms, maybe not even a full-time wrestler, but he was offered an extension of some type. And he didn't want the pay cut and he turned it down. And that's when he tweeted out, hey, they're letting me go. We all know what happened there. 48 hours of absolute chaos. Fans going crazy over the 53-year-old comedy prelim wrestler. And at that point, and this has been widely reported by a number of major and trustworthy sources, Dave Meltzer, Mike Johnson, Fightful, that he had already begun negotiating with other promotions. Now, none of them have been named, but those, if it's plural, that means that both TNA and AEW were talking to this guy, because who else would it be? New Japan's not going to be talking to him. CMLL is not going to be talking to him. AAA no longer exists as its own entity. They weren't talking to him. Could MLW have been one of those promotions? Sure, I don't think he was going to go to MLW. Can't pay him what he wants to be paid. But did Court Bauer call him up and kick the tires? Maybe. Maybe we could throw them in there. But when I hear that he was talking with multiple promotions, to me that means AEW and TNA. I'm not entirely surprised if AEW, I'm not surprised at all if TNA was talking to him. That's ultimately where I figured he would end up. And I'm not entirely surprised AEW called him because I'm sure they saw some value in this widespread fan sympathy for him and had some ideas where, and could have had some ideas where, they thought they could leverage that. Doesn't surprise me. I know a lot of you probably don't want to hear that, but I'm not surprised by it. I also wouldn't have been surprised if they had no interest, but either scenario wouldn't have surprised me in this case, but it all ended up being irrelevant. As the reporting goes, he turned down, he wouldn't even answer in his phone when Levesque was calling him back. Eventually, Nick Khan did get a hold of him and they hammered out a deal and they brought him back. Nick Khan got it done. Now, there's going to be this thing, and there already is this thing, where some of the dumbest and most ignorant and possibly just most painfully tribalistic, hardcore Homer WWE fans don't want to accept that this wasn't a work because they want to believe or they don't want to admit, maybe it's better to phrase it this way. They don't want to admit that Papa Paul isn't some mastermind storyteller who had this all planned all along, right? Because Levesque, of course, at the press conference, when asked, hey, look, truth is back. Was this the plan? Is this storyline? Did you let him go and bring him back? And Levesque basically said, and I'm paraphrasing, did you enjoy the show? It's all part of the show. Which, yes, I concede that Paul Levesque has one of the most fragile egos in the history of professional wrestling. The guy's softer than bread. We all know that. He is not going to want to take an L and admit that he cut a guy and misread his fans and the fans got mad. So he's playing this. It appears as though he's playing this like it was a work. So all of the dumbest people imaginable, and you know who they are, all the hopelessly tribalistic fans are taking the side of, yes, this was in fact a work, while every single reporter of any level of credibility, R-Truth's son, who posted on social media that it was not a work, and R-Truth himself, who replied to some dopey engagement account that was talking about this situation being a work, that it was not in fact a work. R-Truth himself if you're trying to get something over as a storyline, it's not smart for the person involved to tell you it's not a storyline. I mean, this obviously is not a work. So I'm not going to waste a lot of oxygen on that. You just have to be, I mean, seriously, and this might be a little bit, but I think it applies here. You just have to be painfully stupid at this point to think this was all a work. First of all, what would have been the point of working this? So you beat a guy in 4 minutes on Saturday night's main event. You have him get squashed by Jeff Cobb on the way out. You can't come to terms on a new deal, so you tell him you're letting him go. And then he comes back at the end of Money in the Bank for some undetermined reason. What kind of a work is that? What's the story there? There is none. And Dave Meltzer reported earlier today on what the finish of the Money in the Bank match was supposed to be and how the show was supposed to close before this all came together with truth. So it's very obviously not a work. But that's not going to stop certain people. Like Dave Penzer. Remember him? Ring announcer from 40 years ago? Maybe not that long. He got sassy with Sean Ross Sapp and basically was patting Sean on the head. And again, I'm going to paraphrase the tweet. It's like, Sean, there's people like me and Jimmy Corderas and Bully Ray and Eric Bischoff who have been in this business, who understand that everything's a work. What an all-star team of losers this guy picked. I mean, could you pick a worse all-star team of losers to use to... That's how you know this wasn't a work. You know how you know this wasn't a work? Because Jimmy Corderas, Bully Ray, Eric Bischoff, and David Penzer think it was a work. If there was ever any doubt, if for some reason, okay, you didn't believe Sean Ross Sapp, Dave Meltzer, Mike Johnson, Ron Killing's own son, Ron Killings himself, if you didn't believe any of those people, if you think they are all full of shit, if you think WWE was working their entire locker room for this story that doesn't make any sense to begin with, fine. But once you find out that the all-star team of losers, Jimmy Corderas, Eric Bischoff, Bully Ray, and David Penzer think this was a work, the all-star team of constantly being wrong, now you should be thoroughly convinced that this was not in fact a work. Jimmy Corderas. Oh, man. But they're the ringleaders of the stupid. So, there's going to be people out there. Yeah, I saw Eric Bischoff tweeting earlier, and he was comparing it to the art of war, this deep work that they have going on. It just totally insane. When are people just going to completely start ignoring these buffoons? It's never going to happen. It's a rhetorical question with an unfortunate answer. But anyway, look, I'm going to take a stance here that might not be popular or might not be the consensus. I see a lot of people saying that Levesque really blew it at the presser by implying that it was a work, right? Whether it was his pride, as I talked about earlier, obviously an incredibly fragile ego, one of the softest men to ever live. So whether that was his motivation or, whatever the motivation may have been to not want to admit that they'd done goofed and were correcting something that the fans were upset about, I can understand why he implied it was a work. I totally understand why he would imply that. Here's the problem. If you let the fans know that they're the reason you're bringing this guy back, particularly this era of WWE fan, which is very passionate and very vocal, they're going to pull this again, or they're going to try to pull this again. You're empowering these people to start rejecting all kinds of shit they don't like because now they think it's going to work. And look, I understand in this case, they wanted to keep R-Truth. They did offer him an extension. And that kind of changes the matrix on this take a little bit. Because if this was someone who they truly just wanted to cut ties with, right, I would call this a huge mistake to allow the fans to kind of force your hand and bring them back. But I do have to put a small caveat on this because reportedly they did offer him an extension. He just didn't want to take the pay cut, which good for him. He shouldn't have to take a pay cut. I totally understand, even if ultimately you go out on the open market and end up with a smaller deal from TNA, or you end up with a per date deal from Court Bauer, or you're just doing indies and you ultimately end up making less money. I can understand working for a company for 20 years and being, righteously prideful to reject a pay cut. I get it. A lot of us would do the same thing, especially if you're somebody like him who we know, or we suspect. I shouldn't say because you never know, but we can reasonably suspect that a guy who has been under a pro wrestling contract for the last quarter century is okay financially. He doesn't have to take a pay cut. He doesn't have to eat shit if they say, we want to pay you less. So I get it. And he played his hand perfect because the company wasn't going to tell you. We would have no idea this man's contract had the clock ticking on its final days if he didn't tweet it himself. He's the one who leaked it. Remember that. There was no reporter who broke this. R-Truth broke this. Maybe a reporter would have found out eventually. Maybe he could have leaked it to a reporter. Maybe his friends could have leaked it to a reporter eventually. Maybe it would have gotten out at some point. But the bottom line is, he's the one who broke it. And was he playing some 4D chess there? Maybe anticipating some fan support, maybe not to the level, maybe he didn't expect the level of support that he received. But maybe to garner a little sympathy, he was probably thinking, I'm going to get a jump on my next move. Work up a little interest, get the fans talking about me. Raise my price a little bit with potential suitors, right? He maybe didn't even expect all this. If he expected this if he knew this was going to happen, the guy's a fucking genius. But circling back to Levesque, I can understand why he wouldn't want to sit up there and say, yeah, you know what? We made a mistake. The fans spoke, and we listened to our fans. Because the fans are what this is all about. And if we're not listening to the fans, then what are we even doing? Yeah, that would have sounded like good PR. It would have made for great PR. Here's the problem. The fans are then going to listen to that. And when you let Karrion Kross's contract run out in a couple weeks or a couple months, whenever his contract comes due, These fans are going to think to themselves, hey, they listened to us when we wanted truth back. Let's start hijacking shows. Let's start flooding social media. And let's see if we could pull this trick again with Carry On Cross. And then you're stuck in a position where you either have to piss off your audience by them thinking you're a liar because you just told them, hey, look, we listen to the fans. And they're going to say, well, why aren't you listening to us now? You're not bringing them back. So you're either going to have to be called a liar and look like a hypocrite, or you're going to have to bring back this guy who's been repackaged 3 times to the point that he's now back on his original packaging, never gets over, can't draw a dime, can't wrestle. You can't make any money with him. It's clear you don't think you can make any money with him, and now you got to rehire him. You either have to rehire him or tell your audience you're a liar and a hypocrite. And I'm just using Cross as an example. It could happen with anyone now. Once you tell your fans that. Once you admit to the fans, hey, look, yeah, it's clear that you think we screwed up and we're righting that wrong. That's dangerous to tell the fans that. Because with R-Truth, they wanted him back anyway. That's the key to this. They offered him an extension. He turned it down. And he obviously got a deal from Nick Khan that was more agreeable to him, that was more advantageous to him, and without question was better than the first deal he was offered. Otherwise, he still wouldn't have been back. So good for him. Whether it was intentional or not, he played him like a fiddle, and he won. He's a 53-year-old comedy prelim wrestler, and he just finessed another couple years out of these guys. And more than likely, a push. It's really amazing. It's some story. And you got to admire it. And you got to be happy for the guy. Pun absolutely intended. He played the game. But I get why Levesque wouldn't admit that. It's not to his advantage to admit that. And that's where I disagree with a lot of other pundits out there. People I respect. Reasonable minds can disagree in terms of how Levesque handled it. Now, he probably shouldn't have implied it was a work either. How Levesque should have handled this was dodging it. He should have dodged this like, I haven't had time to read the lawsuit dodging. That's how he should have handled it. The problem with Levesque is whenever he gets any question in these pressers that even sniffs upon being a real question that requires a nuanced or careful answer, he shits his fucking pants. It's almost amazing how bad he is at PR. Isn't there some kind of class they can give him? I mean, this parent company is made of money. But then again, you look across the aisle at UFC, and Dana White is just a complete fucking maniac. He says whatever the hell he wants. In pressers and otherwise, and it never fucking matters. So maybe they just don't care, or they know it can't hurt them. Because on the rare occasion that Levesque ever gets a decent question, and to enter Lucas Sharpio and that whole mess, and now this, and you could probably think of 3 or 4 others, he steps on his dick and he trips all over himself. This guy is an inept buffoon at answering anything resembling a hard question. And he's maybe gotten 1 or 2 hard questions in the, how many years has he been doing these pressers now? Probably a year or 2. When did he start them? He's maybe gotten 1 or 2 decent questions. And then everybody else is just up there glugging them and glazing them. And he still can't handle the occasional decent question he gets. It truly is amazing. So no matter where you fall on how you think he should have answered it, whether you think he just should have conceded that they made a mistake and they're doing the right thing and we love the fans, or whether you're more my train of thought, hey, listen, you got to be careful because you can't have a fan base that just decides we don't like this random storyline, we don't like this wrestler that's leaving, we don't like this decision you've made, and just feel like they can hijack anything they want and take the show over, no matter where you stand, right? Where we can all agree is this guy's a fucking buffoon. How can you get so few real questions and yet find yourself in this position time and time again? It is truly remarkable.